So the format for this morning, we're going to give our esteemed guests a couple of minutes just to share their story, their journey to CSR, their interest in the work. And then we've got a couple of questions teed up that will get the conversation going. But again, welcome questions, and just noting that we've got a number of nonprofit partners on the line. Know that this is certainly an opportunity for you to ask questions about strategic partnership, anything you may have on your mind in terms of how you build those mutual benefit relationships, certainly open to those types of questions in this format as well. All right, so we're going to start with Brandy Beatty, who is a senior advisor with Suncor. She's also the chair of the CIVIC board, longtime supporter of CIVIC, past summit chair, and just an incredible thought leader in our circle. And we're deeply grateful for her time this morning to share a little bit about her work. Take it over, Brandy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kirsten. Excited to be here. Have a reason to get up and put on makeup and real clothes this early in the morning. So that's awesome. Thanks everybody for being here. As Kirsten mentioned, I work with Suncor, and I am part of our Chief Sustainability Office, which I'll go into a little bit later. But just to tell you a little bit about my career path, I started out my career in communications at Visit Florida, which was the state's tourism, I think still is the state's tourism marketing corporation, and worked in travel and tourism PR for quite some time. Then ended up transitioning to moving out to Denver, and started working for another PR firm here, doing more kind of business PR. And one of my clients was Western Union, and we did a little bit of work for the Western Union Foundation, which way back then was Luella Chavez D'Angelo, but in doing just a little bit of work with them, really realized that that's what sparked things for me. That's what excited me, was promoting the good work that companies are doing. And then actually was a volunteer for the PJ Party to End Homelessness, which those of you familiar with Denver's Road Home, that was their annual fundraiser, and got to know Suncor from that volunteer opportunity, and was leaving the PJ Party one night, and the director of legal counsel for Suncor, who was also on that volunteer committee, said, "Hey, we have a position open. You should reach out to Alicia, Alicia Burnett, who's my boss." And I did. And I will tell you, when I thought about taking the job at Suncor, I kind of consider myself a greenie, quote unquote. I'm very, the environment is very important to me. I have kids, their future is very important to me, and what the earth looks like in their future. And I thought, I'm going to take this job and I'm going to kind of be tough, and I'm going to be an infiltrator in this, in the energy industry. And then I got there and it really opened my eyes into what it takes to produce a gallon of gasoline or jet fuel, and products that we all need and use every day, and products that truly improve our quality of life. So that was very eye-opening. And after being there for about a year, the company did a bit of a overhaul of its community investment strategy. So there was an opportunity for me to raise my hand and say, "Can I please have this piece of work?" And I did. I did that, and my boss was like, "Yep, that's great." And kind of the way that we're structured, we have a foundation in Canada that sets our strategy. We don't have a foundation down here. We just have a community investment budget and kind of one-person department. But we are charged with taking that strategy set by the foundation in Canada and implementing it in a way that meets the needs of our specific community. So that has been really a career eye-opener for me, moving from the more communications focus to community investment and CSR. But like Eden, that's one of many hats that I wear. So I think there are probably a lot of us here who do more than just CSR. We're probably also communicators or HR folks, or again, wearing many hats. So that's where I am today.
Are we going to do questions now, or do you want me to just jump in?
Hey, Heather, go ahead. But
okay,
before
awesome.
you do, I just want to say thank you for being here as well.
Of course.
And because you may not mention yourself, also a board member with CIVIC. and a longtime advocate for the role of small business in our work, which is so critical here in Colorado. So thank you, Heather, and please do take it away.
You're very welcome. I'm also very pleased to be here this morning. Thanks for having me. My name is Heather Baker. I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development for a law firm in Denver called Otten Johnson Robinson Neff and Raganetti, where we are a 45 attorney, 75 employee law firm, which for law firms is considered medium, but in terms of a business, it's a small business. It's under 100. And as Kirsten said, in my role on the board, I do tend to try and find ways that small organizations can be engaged and get a lot out of their memberships and participation and be civic. My undergraduate degree was in political science, and then I ended up getting a master's of science, not an MBA, in resort and tourism management and marketing. And from then on, I have been in services marketing roles. I started out in architecture and construction. I then moved over into law. I've been doing legal marketing for about 15 years. And as I was thinking in the shower this morning about what I was going to say about, how to get started in this industry, which I don't think anybody has the right answer. There's so many ways to move up in this space. I would say that I think the college class that I rely on the most and have through my whole career is Psychology 101. Psychology and what makes people tick and what makes people react and why they do what they do. It's always part of obviously political science, but also how they make buying decisions and why they decide to take certain jobs and where they don't want to live. And so as I moved up through my various roles, which are mostly marketing, branding, positioning on the web, a lot of social media, and also website and a little PR, but not a whole lot. I always find myself trying to figure out what it is that the person I'm talking to or the audience I'm targeting really wants. And so I don't really have a straight path through this. I think one decides that if this is important to them, as Brandy said, the environment's very important to her. It's something she thinks about a lot. I think that for me, it's more just community engagement, that business is engaged in part of the social fabric and not just writing checks or making demands of economic development agencies, but also saying what they can bring back. And so through my career, I've just always found that there's always that aspect to any decision, how we're going to go after something, how we're going to do something. So the one thing that kept coming back to me as I was thinking about this morning, these questions, how did I get here? What does my career look like? I kept thinking about something that I heard at last year's Be Civic Summit. Lee Grady with Give to Get was doing a presentation on how the role or function of corporate social responsibility or community relations or sustainability fits into different organizations. And obviously that's different by country, culture, size of company. Corporations are going to do it differently than smaller businesses. But he said the real way to make a difference is to embed this thought process, this way of approaching business in every department. And so if I had to say sort of what's been the theme of my CSR journey, it's that I've never had a job that had that in the title, but I've always found a way to bring it into whatever I'm doing. And I think that especially for small businesses, is a bigger recipe for success. You're not always going to have a job with the title that says CSR, sustainability, or community relations, but if the company's mission and part of their culture is give back, I think that's what I've been lucky enough to find, been able to embed that in all the things that I've done. So a winding path to get here, as many, but yeah, that's where I am today. Do you want me to jump right into my typical day? I don't know how you want to continue moving. Are you going to ask these questions?
Is there a typical COVID day? I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, not really. No. So what I love about my job the most, though, is this first question. It's asking us to talk about our typical day and our typical week. And I don't have one. Every day is different. My title is Director of Marketing and Business Development, but I also manage the firm's foundation.
And so a lot of my job, I'd say a third of my job, is engaging with nonprofits, engaging with partners in the community, figuring out ways that we can support them, that mesh with what our employees want to do, because that's a big way we choose how we want to pursue relationships and give money, and how we can do things in addition to just writing checks. So no 2 days are the same, both pre and pre-COVID and now. I get to do a whole bunch of different stuff, which is what I really enjoy as well. How about you, Brandy?
Sure. Yes, not many typical days. And that's what I also enjoy about my job is there's always something new and exciting and different. And sometimes it's a challenging issue that arises. But you know, sometimes it's going to or participating in a nonprofit event that is super uplifting and inspiring. So my role as community relations, senior advisor community relations, sits underneath our chief, or within our chief sustainability office, which also oversees Indigenous and community relations, government relations, and sustainability and communication. So in any given day, I'm changing hats to one of those roles. I would say probably, well, I aspire for the community relations piece to be about 65 to 70% of what I do. And we just hired someone in our department here in the US. So hopefully it will transition to that. But again, responsibilities for me are internal and external communications, general stakeholder relations, crisis communications. I don't do a lot of government affairs work, but then the community relations piece. And I will say there's a benefit to having touching all of those roles because there's so much crossover. When we are working with you know, the Commerce City Council, or we're presenting to them, they want to know, you know, what are we doing in the community? What are we doing to support the community? And we want to know from them, you know, where can we be doing better to support the community and be a good neighbor, you know, aside from our making sure our operations are in check. So yeah, changing hats and being able to really shift gears quickly, I think is important for those of us that serve in, you know, a couple different disciplines.
Thank you both. Let's go ahead and open it up to questions. Jess may sprinkle in a question or two in the middle here. We give her that prerogative, but anybody have a question that they'd like to start us off with? All right, Jess, over to you. What's on your mind?
All right, well, I love this power that I have here. So I know we do have some nonprofits on the line. So Heather and Brandy, what would you say what a good partner looks like? I know some of these people have worked with you, some of them haven't, but what would that look like for both a small business and a larger company that has international reach?
I'm happy to jump in. I would say from an approach and establishing a relationship standpoint, anything you can do to make a personal contact first with a company that you're interested in partnering with is important. And that of course involves doing your background research. And I would say that that we have also approached community nonprofits that we haven't worked with in the past. And I would follow the same advice in wanting to establish a relationship there, but do your homework, you know, find out what are the company's strategic focus areas, and figure out where within your organization's mission or vision that you have a connection there. And then just doing your diligence to find out who is the right, finding your way to the right person to speak to. We work with nonprofits of all sizes. I would say that while we want the majority of our partnerships to be really kind of either very engaged or what we call transformative versus just the transactional, you know, we write a check, but we do have some partners that They're small initiatives, and it's important that we have a presence there every year. So we have everything from that to our partnership with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Denver, for example, where we sponsor the operations of a club. So there's a Suncor club in Commerce City. We also send our employees to that club to volunteer. They read with the kids. We have, because we operate a petroleum refinery, we have a maintenance staff that could probably fix anything in the world. So every year they go up to the Boys and Girls Club's Gates Camp facility, which is a summer camp facility in the Indian Peaks Wilderness area. And we send anywhere between 35 and 50 people, and they completely winterize the camp. They get everything ready for winter. Yeah. And it's great. It's a great skill set matchup. And then we also have one of our senior business leaders who serves on the board of Boys and Girls Club. So we have so many engagement points, and it would be nice to have, a large portfolio of partners like that, but that's not always what some organizations need. So we are also willing to meet our partner organizations kind of where they need us. And sometimes that's, writing $1,000 check to support a spaghetti dinner every year or something like that.
Yeah, I would say that it's very, very similar for us, even though we're very differently sized companies. I manage probably about between 75 and 80 relationships with nonprofits, and I'm a one-person team, and my community relations is only a third of my job. So I can't underscore enough Brandy's comments about doing your research and knowing who you're talking to and trying to come in informed. I have only once in my career had a nonprofit approach me and pitch me and sell me and basically convince me to promote their cause internally. And they did it because they'd seen what else we'd been doing. They'd been to events, they'd seen what was going on in our company, they'd seen the types of things we sponsored, and then they rightly saw there was a good fit. And so that happens, but it's rare, because most of the time, and the cause that our firm supports is chosen by employees. They come to me, and then I advocate for them with our management team to support an event or a cause or a drive of some kind. And then as we get to know the nonprofit, we become more engaged, whether it's having someone on the board or it's sponsoring an event. And so I get asked a lot. I think that the least amount of engagement we have with the nonprofit support is to write a check. They have a crisis, they have a situation, they need something, and they come and they appeal and write a check. That's not common, but it does happen. And then it goes all the way along the spectrum in terms of engagement and partnership to having a long, multi-decade person on the board and doing a lot with, and my best example is Urban Peak. Our organization has been engaged with Urban Peak for at least 20 years, and we have had people on the board. We have an attorney in our firm on the board right now. It's not a quid pro quo, it's just we know enough about them and they get to know us, and so then they invite people to join the board. But we do a lot of their pro bono real estate work. Our law firm focuses on real estate, and so while it's the same kind of activity as taking the crew up to winterize, it's a good skill set fit for us. We have people who know how to do this. It's easy for them, and so they donate their time to help Urban Peak with building planning, capital campaign planning, and getting zoning approval and things like that. And so anyway, that's the pinnacle, the one organization, the one relationship that we have probably the most depth to, but there's everything along the entire spectrum on that too. So, and I'd say what I like best about my job is I get to meet people, I get to talk to people, I get to hear what's important to them, and I get to connect them. I mean, as a small firm, we don't have the biggest budget to write checks, but often in my career, I've found I've been able to introduce people to each other, which has led to other opportunities for the nonprofit, or has led to maybe not non-monetary in-kind kind of giving. We let people use our conference rooms. We do all kinds of things that's seems small, but if everybody did a little bit of it, I think it would, you know, add up. And so we feel good about it. But yeah, so I think that having the opportunity to engage, and Denver, this is one of the best things about Denver. And I know other people say this too, but I'll just chime in today. You know, people move in and out of the nonprofit sector here, cross over back and forth, for-profit, nonprofit, foundation, trade association. You know, if you live here and work here for 5 years or more, you will run into people again who reinvented themselves, who are doing new things. And that's always really fun because it's like, hey, what are you doing now? How'd you get involved with that? You keep in touch with people and you never know how those relationships are going to evolve.
Really good point. There are a lot of sector jumpers in this field, right?
Sector jumper.
It matters, right? That you have that understanding of both the nonprofit strategy and the needs of the business as well. Yeah. So I don't see any questions yet in the chat. Anybody want to raise their hand? Certainly we can keep the conversation going. You have a question, Jess?
Yeah, so Alex Secord, I'll call on you to ask your great question about the transition.
Oh, you're going to make me unmute myself. Thank you. You know, I know that you guys were talking a little bit about kind of COVID earlier, but really, you know, I've seen a ton of movement this year, I think is probably the best way, as far as transitioning to the work from home and virtual environments. And while we've kind of found some ways of engaging, you know, it's not quite the same as Heather, you were mentioning, like renting out your conference room. So how have you both navigated, you know, both networking and continuing to keep in touch with those that you know, have in your network now, meeting new people, but also your associate engagement?
Brandy, you want to start? I can, I don't care. I'm trying to be polite.
You start, I'll follow you.
All right, so all those things. So I've actually been surprised at how many new people I've met during this. And I think it just goes down to personality. People who've said, hey, we're members of the same organization, or we're both engaged. Actually with CIVIC, I had somebody reach out to me and say, hey, I just joined CIVIC. Would you do a call with me? And it was, I mean, that's another great thing about Colorado. I usually, if I ask somebody if they'll have coffee with me, or if I can buy them a coffee, or if they'll meet with me, I have, for the most part, knock on wood, so that doesn't change, I've gotten a lot of positive response to that. So I think you should try that. I mean, it's very easy to jump on a phone call. I'm on Zoom a lot, and so if somebody says I'd rather talk on the phone than Zoom, don't be offended, because we get really tired of having to make sure our hair is perfect and there's nothing on the guest bed behind us in the study. But yeah, I've been surprised at how many new people I've met. I didn't think that would be possible. Staying connected, I've been, you know, emailing people I haven't heard from, but I've been mostly responding to inquiries I've gotten from others. And what else? You were asking about how to keep associates engaged. So in our firm, as a services firm, we already had a fair number of people who would work from home or come and go, or had a different schedule. We are a firm that does a lot of meeting though. Over the lunch hour, we have lots of committee meetings, conversations over the lunch hour, speakers come in, do presentations, and we do have standing happy hours in the firm. And so it is harder to just have a casual conversation and say, hey, you know, that nonprofit you worked with last year, you want to do something with them again, let me know. So I think you have to be more deliberate to get answers to questions like that. But so yeah, I think most people are missing the casual connection, but I think that we're still doing enough. We have a lot of things. I could go off on a tangent, I won't waste everyone's time, but we're doing things like we have a virtual water cooler Facebook group that's private for our firm. And we do a Friday dance party song. Everybody, one person picks it every week, and we do things like that to get people talking. But yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge to keep people engaged, but there are ways people can do it. Hope that answered everything that you asked.
And I don't know if you guys want me to follow up on that question, or I see we have other questions coming in, so.
Dealer's choice. Yeah, we do have a good one here. So I think Nicole's still walking, so we'll ask it for her. But curious on the flip side, what are the pinch points, hard, difficult aspects of your job?
I can answer that one.
And then I have one more, and it's also in respect, this is Nicole, hi. In respect to, I also hear that usually with CSR jobs, you are, as you both have kind of alluded, you are a one-man team, one-woman team. So just curious too, when you are one, when the company is X number and their focuses are marketing or economic or priorities, just kind of understanding those pitch points too, balancing with stakeholders and, you know, internal and external.
Sure. I would say on the balancing side, honestly, it comes down to what is what I like to call, any of you are familiar with Franklin Covey, I call it the quad one issue, like what is urgent and what is important. And unfortunately, sometimes that's not, you know, my community relations work, but it's an issue that we're managing on the communication side or business side. And I often have to ask for grace and patience from our nonprofit partners. Jessica with DSF knows this because I've had to ask for her grace many times in my, you know, delayed response or whatever. So that's just, I mean, and that's the reality of the situation is sometimes there is one of us managing this work. And like Heather, I probably manage the same amount of relationships. It's somewhere between 50 and 60 partners that we work with. And you've got a year-long period to be sure that you're executing on those partnerships and nurturing them as well, where that's needed. So that's a little bit of a pinch point. For me also, working in energy and particularly in fossil fuels and particularly our business right now, you know, when we have years of difficult or challenging performance where our operations have formed to the level that we want them to, that can create a strain even on our community relationships, or it sometimes, and there are probably lots of other industries that face this. You know, you have your community investment work, and sometimes that's positioned as some kind of, you know, washing of your failure to operate in a good manner on this side of things. So that's something that's very difficult for me personally when people speak out and say, well, Suncor just, you know, they're sponsoring the Boys and Girls Clubs to take away attention from their poor performance, because they really are two completely separate things. And when you put your heart and soul into the community work, that's kind of difficult to hear. But and I will say, I'm just going to share with you, and it could be applicable to other people, but I have this little sticky, and I don't know if it's coming through as backwards, but yes, it is. So we have an equation that we use, and that's that trust equals performance times relationship to the power of communication. And, you know, community investment work is all about relationships, but if your business performance is a low multiplier, then there's only so much your relationships can do. So for us, for me, a big challenge is how inextricably linked our relationships can be to our organization's performance. And that's something I have no control over. So it's even harder.
So lest you think me a copycat, Brandy, I actually have an equation too. I really do. I'm not making this up. I don't have it written down. That's a good idea. I should do it. My equation is one I stole from Harvard. It's one of their business case studies. Value equals expectation minus experience. And so, you know, that's pretty generic. It's not quite as focused as yours, but I think that's a pinch point right now is experience. Expectations are high. People have come to expect a certain level of engagement, a certain level of experience with us when they partner with us. And I think that goes both ways. Our employees have an expectation of the way things go. And unfortunately, in challenging times like these, the experience isn't always at the level that it's supposed to be, or supposed to be. That's very judgmental. Where I would like it to be. Let's put it that way. And so, yeah, it's interesting. You say I really hear what you're saying, Brady, about being accused of, you know, well, you're just doing this because, and is it because, is your company only doing this because? And as you can all guess, lawyers are the butt of many jokes and get accused of a lot of stuff. And so there is a similar, like, well, why are you sponsoring schools? Well, because we want to help bring up the next generation of lawyers. It's really kind of simple. I mean, if you start very young, you help people figure out what they want to do. If they want to be in law, they need to know how to get there. And so just sponsoring law schools isn't going to solve any kind of issues around diversity or increasing the types of people geographically who get engaged in real estate and land use law. So yeah, I hear that. The other thing I would say is pinch points. So something I found myself having to explain a lot in the last 6 months is actually internally, people have said, well, hey, times are tough. Why are we still sponsoring these things? Why are we still giving money away? Why are we still got our name on something? And sometimes the answer is easy, which is it's a long-term commitment and we'd already committed to it before everything happened. But sometimes it has to be a more nuanced conversation about, well, because this is who we are and this is what we are trying to make sure we keep going, and we're not going to just leave all of our nonprofit partners high and dry because things are a little bit tough. We might not be able to engage in the same ways and maybe write as big a check, but we're still going to be try to be there for our partners and help them. The other part of it too is that some of this I find, back to that whole psychology thing and business school, part of how business giving works is it has tax implications. And so sometimes the conversation I have is actually pretty simple math. It's like, well, because this is what we budgeted to do this year, this is what we're going to do. And how do we make the best out of it? How do we find ways to save in other areas so that we're not letting the nonprofits who we've engaged with and that we've planned to support down? So yeah, I think the pinch points for my last 6 months are re-justifying my budget. So I'd already gotten it approved, but now every time I spend anything, I'm having to explain it and prove it again and get it approved again, which I totally am fine with, because I think it makes people pay attention. They maybe are just like, oh yeah, there's your budget, it's fine, it's a certain percentage of revenue, go for it. Now it's like, okay, what's everything we're doing and why are we doing it? And then the other pinch point is just not having the interaction, not being able to just walk by someone's office and say, hey, I met this person today, she's on a nonprofit board, she's looking for an attorney, this seems like it might be a good fit for you. Like I can't have a lot of those conversations, but yeah, I think that the biggest challenge right now is just being flexible and being able to just sort of accommodate. Did I answer that question? I'm trying to make sure.
You did. So Kelly has a question. It's multi-part, and I know we've migrated a bit into adapting to COVID in terms of strategy. But Kelly, do you want to unmute and ask your question? Maybe adapt a bit based on the last response.
No, I think Heather, kind of the last part of your response was really helpful to hear. Just kind of, you having to make justifications and kind of stating the case for continued support. But I'm sure others in the nonprofit field have seen varying experiences with donors, of some donors being able to step up during this time and some having to kind of pull back with their support in various ways. So I'm kind of curious how this has impacted both of you, especially representing small and large companies. What elements of your CSR strategy have you had to deprioritize, or have you been able to amplify more because of the pandemic? And just any trends you're predicting in the future, if you think companies will be more likely to increase their CSR engagement after a post-COVID world, or if you think because of a recession, economic reasons, that they'll be having to reduce those budgets.
Good questions, Kelly. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. I will say that I was fortunate that from 2019 to 2020, I had a little bit of a budget increase, but I'm also very pleased to say that even in April when we hit negative crude oil prices, which no one in this industry had ever seen, my company kept our budgets intact. I think there were a few adjustments made in Canada on our foundation side, but to me, it made me feel really good about working for Suncor, because this is a company that realized that no, now more than ever, these communities need these dollars. And because I had that increase, we kind of had some ideas for things we were going to do with that, but that all changed, and the little bit of discretionary budgeting we had went to support COVID response and relief efforts in the community. So I was just in a really fortunate situation. I don't know what will happen next year. Like, we submitted a request for a flat budget to this year for next year. But I just, I don't know. And even, you know, it could change at any time. So you just have to be willing to be nimble and flexible, I think.
Yeah, I also had a flat budget from well, actually you had an increase. I had a flat budget from 19 to 20, but in terms of actual spent, I'm down probably about 30%. And that's not just my giving budget, that's my marketing budget too. And although they're separate on paper, they end up overlapping sometimes, right? So if I buy tickets to something, that helps a nonprofit sometimes, but it's not coming out of my foundation, it's coming out of my ticket budget. You know, we all have stuff like that we have to manage. So I think the only thing that I would consider direct COVID response that we're involved with is probably food security related. We have relationships with food banks and what's the other word? Pantries, food pantries, that we already had existing relationships with, that we just sort of upped our game and did more with. And then there was also a push by our employees. It wasn't really a push, is a bit strong, just a question like, hey, you know, we all live in various neighborhoods around the city of Denver, different, you know, city of Lakewood, city of Evergreen, etc. Can we focus our giving to these food pantries and to organizations that are helping support those who are having food scarcity issues? Can we sprinkle that around the communities we all live in? So we probably did more with food related things this year. And then I found organizations we hadn't worked with in the past, but I knew of, because we wanted to be very deliberate about supporting specific geographic areas of Denver. But I would say that's really the only COVID change. That's the only thing that change was made because of COVID. One thing, I don't know if this is the perfect place to mention this, but one thing that I have heard mentioned, and I've told Jessica this story already. I actually had a nonprofit partner toward the beginning of this call me and ask me if I wanted my check back. And I basically was like, okay, don't say that to anybody else, okay? Let's rephrase that. The marketing hat came on, the communication strategy was like, holy crap, don't offer them their check back. But one thing I have really been impressed with is organizations are doing their best to keep sponsors and supporters engaged while not returning their checks, which I applaud. Like, how do you find a way to say, okay, you already gave us money for the year. We're not going to be able to do all this stuff that we've committed to doing in exchange. So how can we change that up? And so I've had lots of conversations about that. And I've been fortunate to be in a position where I've been able to say, we don't want anything more or different. Just keep the check. Now, not everyone's in that position, but that's been nice. And then we've also just, you know, told organizations that if they're not going to do anything at all and they don't have a creative answer for how to use the money, just hold it until next year. So we're not taking any money back, which I think is a nice position to be in. I really feel sorry for people who are in that position, but I get it. I mean, there are some organizations that are making tough choices, but I think that that's the only other real accommodation because of COVID. We've had to find ways to either apply the donation differently or transfer it, move it, apply it elsewhere, however that might work. Did I answer the question? How do you see her dancing?
Yes, indeed. We've got 2 more questions, and then we're going to close with some announcements that Jess has for us. So we'll start with Susan. Susan, you raised your hand a moment ago. Do you have a question still? Great.
I do, and it's really a piggyback on the sentence that Heather just said, and it's a little bit of the flip side. So, like you, we paid out some of our big major sponsorships beginning of the year, and nonprofits, very graciously said, "What do you want us? We'll give you your money back." And I am like, "No, like we don't care. Like, keep the money, please keep the money."
Yeah.
There are other organizations that we had budgeted for that we hadn't paid out yet, and some are for community events or a downtown Boulder partnership or downtown Boulder Fall Fest, for example. And I have still been hoping and intending to still give that budgeted money to that said organization, because that was part of our plan. That organization may and may not have already pivoted to do something else where they can use the money. So Brandy and Heather, how important has it been for you to still pay out those funds to the organizations that you budgeted for versus saying, I've got another organization that's got a greater need, we're going to change our minds, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. And, to me, I've been saying, if, we talked about sector jumping. I come from the nonprofit world and made a career change and a sector change because I wanted to be on the giving side. So I understand that and have compassion for an organization with COVID may have bailed on all of their events. But if we still want to partner with them, we should still be committed to giving them those funds, no matter how they use them. And I'm getting some pushback. So I'm curious about, what you're doing with funds you've budgeted for, when organizations are doing different things.
You're getting pushback internally from management or pushback?
Yeah, can we should we cut those funds? Should we give them somebody else, somewhere else? And or even some of the smaller organizations that we support that are sort of saying, we don't know. We're not doing events. So we don't know how we can use your money. And I'm sort of saying, put it in the G&A. It's really fine with us.
Mm-hmm.
So just curious what you're doing with, are you adamant that you're giving funds to those organizations that you budgeted for in the beginning of the year, no matter what their circumstances, no matter what has happened with their events because of COVID?
I'll jump in here. If we had any kind of verbal commitment in place, of
right.
Yeah. Of course, we and when I go into the year and I kind of have my line item. My line items are very, I intend to execute on all of those. And it's always having a conversation with the partner first, but I'm with you in that we know these organizations can use the funding, even if they're not having their annual fundraiser. They need the funds more than ever because
right.
They don't have this event to leverage to meet their fundraising goals. So we will, and I have kind of over the past couple of years transitioned to trying to be much more flexible with our partners. And if what they need is general operating funds, we are okay with that because to us, our nonprofit partners know how to, they know how to fulfill their mission. They know how to use the funds in the best way possible. And I'm going to go ahead and push here one of my favorite bloggers. Kirsten hears me talk about this guy all the time, but one of my favorite bloggers is a nonprofit leader from Seattle, and his name is Vu Lee. It's V-U-L-E-E. So I see lots of heads nodding. And his blog is Nonprofit AF. And he's just, I follow a lot of his counsel in terms of how funders can best support their nonprofit partners, because again, he comes from that nonprofit side. But yes, we, even if an event is, I wouldn't say this is 100% across the board, there would be a conversation with the partner, but even if an event is not happening, we would want those funds to still support a company, a partner's overall mission, because that's why we're partnering with them anyway. Their mission aligns with what we're doing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I'd say it's pretty much the same for us. I mean, we're not, this is going to sound a little bit strong, but if a nonprofit's not asking, I'm not pursuing. I mean, and I mean that in the sense of I am so busy. I've got so much going on that I'm not sitting down and going over my list of nonprofits and calling them all. If they reach out to me and we have a conversation, we're not saying no to people. We're not going back on any commitments. We're not changing amounts.
Right.
We're having a dialogue. So to Brandy's point, we're having conversation. We're figuring out. We always support, hey, we were going to give you $2,500 for a table. Of that, $2,000 would have been tax deductible, and so now we're going to give you $2,500. It's a straight donation. You use it how you want. I mean, yeah, we're doing that a lot, but I'm not in a position, unfortunately. 30% of my life is this part of my job, to go around and check in and ask, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? I'm relying on my nonprofit partners to come to me and say, this is what's going on. I know that's hard, but it's just, there's just too much. There are too many asks, there's too much happening.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is I've gotten a big uptick in asks from organizations we've never done anything with before this year. And the way our budgeting works, or the way our process works, is that somebody who works for the firm, not just an attorney, it can be somebody who has a different role in the firm, has to advocate for that cause, that nonprofit. They have to be engaged in it somehow. And so if somebody just cold emails me or cold calls me and says, hey, will you make a donation? I can't do that by our structure. But if it's something that I think somebody in the firm would be interested in because they're doing something similar or they're looking for a cause, I can make that connection, but I can't commit to that money. I have to say, okay, we need to start building something here. So I have not been in a position to write checks for new things because the engagement has not been there. And I've tried to be really sort of soft and nuanced about it. I was like, look, we're not rejecting you outright. It's just that we have this process and we need to stay with it even though things are different. And how can I help you find someone else who might be able to support you? But our foundation is also different. We're not a C anything. We're a LLC. It's a corporate foundation that is for tax purposes. And so we don't take grant applications. We don't do anything like that. It's purely through, do we support the organization because we have people engaged with it? So can I jump into Jessica's question real quick? Because I know we're getting short on time here.
And I know
Please.
Holly had one too, so I want to touch on, see if Holly's can be intertwined maybe.
Okay, is it written there?
It is not, and we can also follow up by email. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Holly, why don't you go ahead and put your question in the chat, and then Heather, if you want to address Jessica's, and we'll see if we can get to all of them. If not, we'll send them out by email. Work?
Sure.
Yep.
So Jessica's questions is about how Otten Johnson and Suncor, have responded to recent social justice and unrest. If you want actual specifics, there's actually a statement on our website you can go check out. We have, we did a lot of thinking around this, and while others were just saying we don't, we support this issue, we abhor that, we decided to find something that lawyers and law firm could get engaged with that would actually support greater racial justice and address some of the current issues that are being raised around inclusiveness and diversity. And just as a bit of information, the legal industry is one of the least diverse in North America. And so we have already been engaged in some organizations that are trying to change that. But we decided that helping support voting initiatives and election integrity was a good way to help support access for all groups who live in our country, all of our fellow citizens, regardless of identifiers. And so that's how we've responded. And we're working really hard to not just give some money, but also give airtime and educate all of our staff, from our managing partner down to our receptionists and everything in between, about the best way that they can get engaged. So that's really about how empowering others and giving them the tools to make change.
I'll just chime in quickly that we at Suncor, we also issued a statement. Our executive leadership team together issued a statement, and we took another. We had just kind of launched our DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy early last year. So we took a look at that, kind of made some tweaks there. But we also had a lot of internal conversations via Teams with executive leaders coming on and talking about their experiences. Wow, you know, even being so personal as to say, here are ways that I realize I have not been inclusive, or, you know, I have not treated someone the way they should be. We had some Indigenous employees come on and talk about their experiences in life, so that we all got a conversation and listen. And I will say for CIVIC, CIVIC, I think, did a great job responding to this issue with the CEO pledge, which we're not part of yet, but it's on my list. But also just bringing companies together to start talking about, you know, what do we do in response to this? So, so that was a big piece as well, just being engaged there.
And the CEO pledge was really important to us because as a small company, we don't have a lot of sort of corporate policy and history of dealing with social issues in other markets. We're just the 75 of us figuring this out. And so it was really nice to be able to join a group that we're all committed to working together and collaborating. And so we were able to sign on to that pledge, and it has been a real help.
Well, thank you both for sharing your wisdom with us. I know I was taking notes the entire time, and I saw several of you also doing the same. So we will definitely follow up and include your question, Holly, so thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
We could not do it without the power of our network and our outstanding board members. And thank you each for giving your time today to join us and ask these great questions. I know I get a lot out of this, but I hope each and every one of you do too. And we do have 3 great events coming up in October. A new one that we just announced is Democracy is Good for Business with Steve Rockland, founder of Impact ROI. And this is really going to be focused on nonpartisan voting initiatives that any organization can take for the upcoming election. And that'll be on October 7th from 2 to 3 p.m. partnership with the Chamber. We'll have our monthly peer roundtable on October 8th from 8 to 9 a.m. And of course, you've all probably heard me say this, my favorite event of the year is coming up, the CIVIC Summit, which is presented by Suncor, and Johnson is one of our other fabulous sponsors, on October 22nd. So we'll share these out, and hopefully you can join us for each of these.
I'd just like to say really quickly before we hang up that if anyone wants to send me an email, please feel free. If you have a question that you didn't get to ask or something you just wanted to do one-on-one, my email address is in all the communications, I think. I don't know if it is just as it.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to have that continued contact if people have questions, if there's something I can do to help or connect you with somebody.
Same, very well put, Heather. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. It's really outstanding conversation, yeah. And thanks everybody for joining us. Have a fabulous day.